Good. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's go straight to it. I'm going to ask you about Suella Braverman, but we're not going to spend the whole interview on this. Has she done anything wrong, and does she need to resign?
Well, we don't know. I mean, that's the problem, I think, is that you've got this issue about speeding, which should be easy to deal with and clear up about whether she broke the ministerial code or not, but because she won't answer basic questions about what she asked the civil servants to do, we're still talking about it. Meanwhile, people don't feel safe to walk the streets, the asylum system is in chaos. I think she just needs to answer these questions so that we can get back to actually solving some of the very many problems that have emerged in her own brief.
Well, indeed, that's what we're asking people today. What should they be concentrating on? But I mean, is it her not answering the questions? And yes, I agree with you, she should answer some of these questions very clearly. However, is it her that's the problem, or is it the civil servants? She asked the civil servant, oh, can I do this as a one-to-one private course? Can you help me sort that out? Or is it available? Perfectly legal. They are available. You just have to pay big money for it. But people do these all the time, apparently. Couldn't the civil servant just have said, no, I can't do that for you, Secretary of State. It's not in my brief. It's a private matter. End of the matter. Instead, they go bleating in an email to the Cabinet Office. Now the Prime Minister has had to meet with his independent ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus. We're talking about it now. The Prime Minister asked about it at the G7 summit. Wouldn't the solution be if civil servants just got on with their job and stopped making complaints about ministers with whom they disagree?
Yeah, or she could just stick to the ministerial code. It's made clear to ministers when they're appointed that they need to act in accordance with the ministerial code, and they're expected to ensure that they know what that is and that they follow it at all times. I'm sure people make mistakes, but this particular politician appears to make a lot of mistakes. She's not the first time that she's been in trouble for breaking the rules. I think she just needs to answer these questions. She just needs to come clean about what actually went on. And then what I'd really like to see her do is sort out the appalling backlogs in the asylum system and the rise in crime that has meant that many people not only don't feel safe to walk the streets at night, but in parts of the country don't feel safe to walk the streets during the day either.
Well, indeed, I want to ask you about Cardiff, because the very sad news has emerged this morning in the last half hour or so that 2 teenagers did die in their very serious car crash that happened in Ely in Cardiff. And we've seen extraordinary scenes. I think if you're watching on the TalkTV right now, you'll be able to see where we just got large crowds of people, up to 100+ people at some points on the streets, cars set alight, some emergency vehicles attacked, windscreen broken, people digging up chunks of paving slabs to throw at the police and others. Very, very big concerns. Riot police having to be moved in with dogs to quieten things out. I mean, this accident happened, this collision happened at 6 p.m. in the evening, and this has all gone off overnight. This is absolutely terrifying. This is a local residential area. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it is terrifying for people who are there, and I saw from the news reports that have emerged this morning that a lot of the local residents are just appealing to people for calm and to try and calm down what is a frightening situation for the people who live there. The police have also asked the same thing, and I think I would just add my voice to that. It's a really worrying, quite frightening development, and I think if people could heed those calls, it would do a lot to help people who are living in the area who are genuinely very frightened at the moment.
Yeah, I know you've got an announcement today, and I will come on to that, but I just want to ask you also about going back to Suella Braverman. Well, obviously you talk about, Home Office getting on with what they do, and part of their brief, of course, is immigration. We are expecting those immigration figures out on Thursday to be pretty damning for those of us who think that we should have perhaps stronger control of our borders, with a net migration of 700,000 more people to the country in the last year. Many people believe it's actually higher than that, and could be up to 1.2 million according to a Home Office document in the next year. These are huge numbers of people, no extra housing, no extra GP surgery appointments, school places, parking places, and the rest of it. Trains have actually been provided to accommodate all these people. Is that number too many? And if so, what number would be the right number under a Labour government?
Well, we think net migration should come down, and we want it to come down. We expect it will, because there are 2 reasons why it's currently very high. Ukraine and it was right in our view that we offered sanctuary to people fleeing Putin, and Hong Kong, where we opened up to BNO passport holders because of the aggressive actions of China, and in our view that was right as well. But there's another reason why net migration is very high, and that is because for a long time we filled gaps in the labour market by attracting people to come here from overseas rather than investing in young people trying to get their first jobs and opportunities, and in older people, particularly the over 50s, many of whom would like to return to the labour market but currently can't because of ill health and because of a very intractable system that doesn't support them to do so. They're the things that we think the government ought to be focusing on, and we certainly would, to try and make sure that the jobs that are filled in this country are filled first and foremost by people here who want to work, who should be able to work, but currently can't get those opportunities.
Well, except a lot of these jobs often are only advertised abroad in the first place. But I mean, but what you say, you want to bring that number down, it should come down. What would be the right number for net migration?
Well, I'm not going to put an arbitrary number on it, Julia.
It's not an arbitrary number, is it? Because that's no, Lisa Nandy, it's not an arbitrary number. We're constantly, we need to know how many more people do we need, and how many more people can we accommodate in terms of the housing, school places, GP surgeries, number of train carriages, available, number of buses that run. I mean, isn't this what we pay our supposedly first-class civil service to do, rather than writing emails complaining about their ministers, to know this sort of stuff? We know Labour's been in talks with high-level civil servants over the last year. There isn't an arbitrary number. There is a number. I mean, maybe to the nearest 100,000.
Well, it is. Yeah, I mean, look, but it is arbitrary if you don't know how you're going to meet it. And what we've had for 13 years is the government setting numbers on the number of people who'll come in and then never, ever meeting that target and just exceeding it over and over again. So it's a complete and utter waste of time. It's a con trick for the public. What we want to do is align migration and skills so that where you are trying to recruit people to come and work here from overseas, you're only doing that when you've already invested in your own workforce and you can't fill those vacancies. I heard a story yesterday from a council leader who the council is currently advertising in Zimbabwe for social workers because they can't fill those vacancies here. Now, I know there are people up and down this country who would love to qualify as children's social workers, but at the moment we've got a real workforce problem. We've got burnout and stress. We've got people leaving the profession, and we're not training enough people up to come into those professions. That's why we've put a real onus on workforce planning. That's the way we ought to manage the migration system, not these numbers that the government attaches to press releases that never get met. But
there's no question at all, none of these targets have been met. However, there's also an element where, we're looking at not being able to train up enough doctors and others and social workers for, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, at which point, so we're going to continue to see rising net migration for all that time. So the whole way through, if Labour get elected in 24, you would be seeing rising immigration, net immigration, to deal with that until you can train up those people, right?
Well, no, I don't accept that, actually, because if you look at the big gaps in skill shortages at the moment, it's the big drop-off in the number of over 50s in the labour market. A lot of people, particularly during the pandemic, either suffered from ill health or took time out and haven't returned.
We're not going to fill all those jobs with a bunch of 55-year-olds.
And that's particularly... I don't see why not. I mean, 55-year-olds have a lot to offer.
I am 55.
Frankly, if you come to the example that I just used, children's, well, you have a lot to offer, Julia. And if you want to
I'm getting that on my business card.
Children's social worker, the next Labour government will help you.
I'll do something useful with my day for a change. Let me ask you, look, we just talk about pressure of immigration. A lot of that pressure is on housing, isn't it? Now, you're going to be forcing a non-binding vote on abolishing the leasehold system in England and Wales in the Commons today. What's that all about?
Well, there are 5 million people in this country who currently live in leasehold properties. They save up, they get a deposit, they manage to get a mortgage, they finally achieve the dream of owning their own property, and then they find that actually they don't own their own home at all, because in England and Wales, unlike almost every other country in the world, we still have this feudal, archaic system where you can buy your own home but then find that somebody else owes the lease. And the problem with that is that many of those leaseholders then get hit hit with massive charges for maintenance works, for communal areas, charges that sometimes they can't even understand what they are, and nobody feels under any obligation to explain to them. And since the appalling tragedy at Grenfell and the right response from the government, which was to ensure that building safety works are carried out in flats across the country, many of those leaseholders have been hit with massive unfair bills and are effectively trapped in their own homes, unable to move or move forward with their own lives. We think that needs to change. The government thinks that needs to change, but at the start of this year they said they would abolish this feudal system. They now appear to have rowed back on it. We think that's completely wrong, and so we're asking Tory MPs, Labour MPs, all MPs to come together today and say to the government, come on, time to act. This injustice has got to end.
Can I also ask you, we had the latest public borrowing figures, £25.6 billion borrowed in April. That's a way higher, so I think £11.5 billion more than it was in April the year before. Of course, this is down to massive help with the energy support scheme, benefits rises, and of course massive rising debt repayments as interest rates has gone up. At that time, with that extra borrowing going up, we also see James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, taking an 8-day tour around the Caribbean and Latin America. He has hired a jet, £40 million jet. It costs £10,000 an hour to hire, and it's the same one that was used for filming in the TV series Succession, involving sort of billionaires travelling around. I have to say, I'm very glamorous it looks too. If you were Shadow Foreign Secretary for quite some time, if you were Foreign Secretary, would you want to be riding in that jet?
I mean, Julia, you're breaking my heart here. I was the Shadow Foreign Secretary for 18 months, and the furthest that I managed to travel was Westminster. I was appointed in the middle of a pandemic, and I was moved out of the post the week before restrictions were lifted. Wow. So I went precisely nowhere. But I'm not going to criticise James Cleverly for going abroad and doing his job. He does have to travel. He should travel. I don't know what this jet is, but I think he ought to be out there on the front foot, meeting people from other countries and helping to make the world beyond our shores a safer place.
Should he be travelling on a private jet?
I mean, I don't know why the precise travel arrangements. There have been some absurd examples recently of, Rishi Sunak flying to the north of England because the trains are in chaos while the rest of us stand at train stops waiting for trains that never arrive. Those sorts of things really annoy people. They annoy me. But if it's the quickest and best way to get around, I won't criticise him for that.
OK, interestingly, and should there be criticism of Rachel Reeves, your Shadow Cabinet colleague, the Shadow Chancellor? She posted a picture of her ticket travelling to America for high-level talks and foolishly left in her seat number, I think 3K. Basically, she was sitting in first class, one of those lovely British Airways beds that most of us would only dream of ever affording to fly on. Should she be travelling first class?
No, I think where she sits is totally irrelevant, actually. What is really important is that she's going abroad, she's going to the United States to make the case for increased investment in Britain, and why, if we bring stability to the markets under a Labour government, Britain will become an attractive place to invest again.
Why does she need to travel
jobs
first
in my
class?
Constituency. I care more about that than where she sits. Well, because it was apparently paid for by a private donor. She's gone over there to work. I don't know whether she needs to travel first class or not.
Why is a private donor paying for the Shadow Chancellor to travel first class? That's what I would ask. What's in it for that private donor?
Well,
I mean, a private donor's going to offer me to
political parties in this country. That's the system. The alternative is that the state pays for it, and you've just rightly said that there's real criticism of politicians for using public money at a time when people are struggling. So I don't think you can criticise us for both.
So would you happily fly first class and a private donor paying up to £8,000 for one of those tickets to fly first class to the States on business?
I think most people would travel first class, wouldn't they, if somebody offered to pay for it? I think the bigger issue is that, most of us, we do live very ordinary lives, most MPs, including Rachel. She looks after her kids, she's a working mum, she's working incredibly hard to try and sort out the mess that the Conservatives are going to leave to us if we win the next election. And I'm glad that she's over in the United States, and I hope that it results in a much better deal for Britain.
All right, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That's Lisa and Nandy there.